My name is Rachel Carter, 28 years old from suburban California. I was kicked out by my own family on my 22nd birthday, with nothing but a key to an apartment I couldn't afford and a suitcase full of panic. I went from sleeping behind dumpsters to building a shelter that now saves lives. But the people who left me for dead? They came back. Not with apologies, but with their hands out. This is the story of how I turned betrayal into a mission, and how I made sure the truth they tried to bury burned brighter than ever. Before we dive into this emotional journey of betrayal, survival, and redemption, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change the way you see the world. And if you've ever felt abandoned or had to fight your way back from nothing, this one's for you. Let's begin. Birthdays in the Carter house were usually a big deal. Balloons. Cake. Mom's plastic champagne glasses with the gold trim. But this one felt different. Too quiet. Too polite. I should have known. Happy birthday, sweetheart, my mom said as she slid a small pink box across the table. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Open it. Lauren, my older sister, chimed, sipping her rose like it was a party she didn't want to be at. I peeled the paper off slowly, half smiling. Inside was a small silver key attached to a cheap keychain that read Home Sweet Home. At first, I thought it was a joke. A key to what? Then my dad cleared his throat. It's time you stood on your own, Rachel. You're 22 now. An adult. What? I laughed nervously. Is this like a symbolic thing? Or? No, Mom interrupted. We found you a small studio in Glenview. It's already paid for, first month and deposit. I looked between them. You're kicking me out? We're helping you start your life, Lauren said, her voice syrupy. You've been here too long. Dropping out of college and staying home isn't a life plan, Ratch. My stomach sank. You know I dropped out because of my panic attacks. Because I couldn't breathe through an hour-long lecture without breaking down. Dad frowned. And how long are we supposed to coddle that? You think life's going to wait until you feel ready? I stared at them in silence, the key suddenly heavy in my hand. You have until Friday, Mom said softly, like she was offering me a weekend getaway. The new tenant is moving into your room next week. She's a friend of Lauren's. So you already planned this? You already replaced me? No one answered. I stood up from the table. The half-eaten cake sat in front of me, a cruel reminder of what this day was supposed to be. My chest tightened as the room tilted slightly, the beginnings of a panic attack curling in the edges of my mind like smoke. I'm not ready, I whispered. You'll figure it out, Dad said, already reaching for the remote. Lauren leaned in and gave me a half-hearted hug. Happy birthday, sis. I walked out of the house that night with a duffel bag and a key to a place I hadn't even seen. It was a strange kind of grief. I wasn't just being pushed out, I was being erased. Exchanged for someone more convenient, someone less complicated. As I stood on the curb, waiting for a rideshare to the studio apartment they forced on me, I remember thinking, this isn't love. This is betrayal with frosting, and it was only the beginning. The studio was barely livable. Cracked tile, flickering lights, and a smell that clung to your clothes like damp sadness. But I stayed. I stayed because I thought if I did what they wanted, showed them I could be independent, they'd see I was worth keeping. I was wrong. By the third week, I couldn't afford groceries. The job interviews weren't calling back, and the panic attacks were getting worse. Some days I couldn't get out of bed, let alone cross town on a bus to smile at a hiring manager and pretend I wasn't falling apart. When the rent came due, I had $38 in my checking account and a voicemail from the landlord. We'll need the full amount by Friday or you're out. I reached out to friends, old classmates, people I used to study with, even a couple neighbors from high school. Most didn't respond. One said, I'd help, but I just bought a new laptop. Another offered her couch, for 2 nights. By the end of the month, I had a suitcase, a dying phone, and nowhere to go. I told myself it would just be for a night or two. I found a bus shelter near the edge of town, behind a strip mall that had mostly gone dark. It was late October, the nights were cold, but I wrapped my arms around my knees and pretended it was temporary. That this wasn't who I was now. I remember watching the cars drive past on Maplewood Avenue. It was the same road my mom used to take to drop me off at school. I used to count the stoplights. Now I counted the minutes until sunrise. People passed me like I was a shadow. I tried the public library the next day to stay warm. I charged my phone and sent out another wave of desperate texts. 2 friends said they'd think about it. They didn't reply again. I cried in the library bathroom that afternoon. Quiet, panicked sobs that I muffled with my sleeve. I didn't want to be angry at them. They weren't bad people. They just didn't know how to deal with someone drowning. People back away when they think your pain might pull them under too. By the end of the week, I'd stopped counting how many nights I'd slept outside. The worst part wasn't the cold or the hunger. It was the silence. The invisibility. I walked past my old high school, my old gym, even my parents' neighborhood once. Nobody saw me. I had become a ghost in my own hometown. One night, I pressed my back against the wall behind a gas station, using my hoodie as a pillow. I looked up at the stars and thought, they really meant it. They really left me, and the scariest part, no one was coming back. I met Sasha on a Thursday night behind the old train station. I was crouched behind a dumpster, trying to stay out of the wind, when I heard footsteps, fast, frantic, and getting closer. A girl about my age ducked into the alley, eyes wide. Hair tangled, chest heaving. She looked over her shoulder, then at me. "Please," she whispered. "Don't say you saw me." Without thinking, I moved over and pulled my blanket halfway across the space between us. She slid in beside me, shivering and silent. We sat there for almost 10 minutes, not saying a word, as some guy walked past the alley, cursing and kicking a trash can. When it was quiet again, she exhaled. "Thanks. I'm Sasha." I nodded. "Rachel." She looked rough, thin, scratched up, wearing 2 different socks and no coat. But her eyes were sharp, full of something I recognized. "Fight, Foster House," she said, answering my unasked question. "The dad's a creep." I finally told someone. And they told him. So I ran. I didn't know what to say. What do you say to someone who's been hurt by the very people who were supposed to protect her? "I got kicked out," I said softly. "My own family." Sasha didn't look surprised. "Figures. People don't like broken things." That night, we shared a protein bar she'd lifted from a corner store and slept back to back for warmth. It was the first time in weeks I didn't feel completely alone. We stuck together after that. We made a routine: shelter during the day, scavenging at night. We cleaned car windshields at stoplights, shared socks, and kept each other from disappearing. There were moments we even laughed, real, belly-aching laughter that echoed down alleys and under overpasses. She had this sharp, sarcastic wit that cut through the darkness like a blade. We had nothing, but somehow, we had each other. She was like a sister. My first real one, but nothing good ever lasted long out there. One morning, Sasha woke up burning with fever, her lips cracked, her breath shallow. I tried to get her to the free clinic downtown, but the line was out the door and they told us to come back Monday. We went back to our usual spot behind the train station. I gave her the last of our water and wrapped her in every piece of clothing we had. She didn't make it through the night. When I woke up, her hand was still in mine, cold, fingers curled like she was still holding on. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the sky. A train passed in the distance. I remember thinking how unfair it was, that the world just kept moving, like she hadn't existed at all, but she had existed. She'd mattered, and I promised, as I pressed my forehead to hers one last time, that I would make sure the world never forgot her. After Sasha died, I stopped sleeping. Grief changed me. It hollowed me out, sure, but it also lit something inside me. A slow, cold-burning fire. I couldn't go back to who I was before. I wouldn't survive that girl again, so I did the only thing I could think of. I got moving. The first job I found was sweeping the back lot of a fast food restaurant. Minimum wage. Cash only. They didn't ask for paperwork, which was good, because I didn't have any address to write down. I worked from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. before the real employees showed up. I cleaned up beer bottles, cigarette butts, and sometimes worse. One time, a raccoon lunged at me from the dumpster. I didn't flinch. I just kept sweeping. After my shift, I'd walk 2 miles to the gas station to clean up and apply for more jobs on their dusty corner computer. I circled ads in the local newspaper like it was still 1997. I even tried to sell some of Sasha's old things, a bracelet she once said was lucky, a book she used to read to fall asleep, but I couldn't part with them. I carried them in a drawstring bag, like proof that she had been real. That she had meant something. Some jobs turned me away the second they saw me, others hired me, then let me go when I started asking for pay stubs or breaks. Still, I kept showing up. Dishwashing, folding clothes at a thrift shop, cleaning motels. I burned through shoes like they were paper. My hands cracked from soap and cold and cheap bleach. I was humiliated more times than I can count. One night, I overheard 2 waitresses at a diner laughing about how I smelled like rain and fear. I cried in the walk-in freezer while unloading milk crates, but I kept going, because every night when I curled up in my borrowed cot at the back of an old church shelter, I heard Sasha's voice in my head, "If we ever get out of this, let's build something for people like us." That promise became my fuel. I started saving every cent. I ate 1 meal a day. I took free classes at the community center, budgeting, typing, CPR. I scribbled dreams in a torn notebook: shelter, showers, beds, safety, hope. The fire inside me didn't burn bright, but it never went out. And slowly, painfully, I started to rise. I wasn't healed. I wasn't whole, but I had direction. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was rebuilding. Brick by invisible brick. And with each floor I imagined, each wall I dreamt into being, I heard Sasha's laugh echoing in my head, daring me not to stop, so I didn't. It took me 4 years to get there, 4 years of hustling, saving, learning, and climbing out of the ditch life threw me in. But when the doors to Sasha's haven opened, I didn't cry. I stood in the center of that renovated duplex, hands slightly shaking, and just breathed. Paint still clung to the air. The bunk beds were freshly built, sheets folded neatly at the foot of each mattress. We had 8 beds, 2 working showers, a makeshift kitchen, and a locked medicine cabinet with donated first aid supplies. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And it was ours. I used every connection I had made through local nonprofits, every dollar from community grants, and every ounce of trust one had earned to get it built. I named it after the girl who taught me that surviving the street isn't the same as living. Sasha had dreamed of it before she died. I was just following the blueprint she left behind in every conversation, every story, every hope she whispered when we were half frozen and trying not to give up. Word spread fast. We weren't some massive organization with a glossy brochure. We were the place you came when everyone else turned their backs. Girls showed up with nothing but the clothes they were wearing and stories that sounded like mine: betrayal, abandonment, escape. Some had bruises. Some had babies. Some didn't even speak for the first few days, but we saw them. We gave them warmth, safety, and the one thing no system had ever offered: dignity. I never planned for recognition. I didn't need applause. But when a local journalist asked to do a story on us, I said yes. Maybe because I wanted the world to know Sasha's name. Maybe because, deep down, I was tired of hiding. The article ran under the headline "From Homeless to Hero." Local woman builds shelter for abandoned girls. That's when the phone calls started. Old teachers, classmates, church members who hadn't spoken to me in years, now they wanted to donate. Or interview me. Or say they always knew I was strong. I ignored most of them. But one email stopped me cold. It was from my sister, Lauren. "Saw your article. Impressive stuff. Mom's been talking about you nonstop. We're all so proud. Let me know if you need help with funding, we've got connections." Connections. The same ones they didn't use to keep me off the streets. I stared at the message for a long time, then closed the tab. I didn't build Sasha's haven for them. I built it in spite of them. Still, I knew they'd come back eventually. That's how people like them work, only showing up once the house is built, asking where their name should go on the plaque. But this house had no room for their guilt. This house was made from hunger and fire, and it stood for the girls they never saw coming. It started with a knock on the shelter office door. I was sorting donated blankets when I heard it, 2 short taps, like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they belonged there. When I opened the door, time stuttered. Lauren stood in front of me, wrapped in a sleek camel coat, hair pinned back in that perfect Instagram influencer style. Her eyes flicked over the interior of the shelter, bare walls, metal bunk beds, fluorescent lights. Her smile wobbled, like she wasn't sure whether to be impressed or condescending. "Rachel," she said softly. "You look good." I didn't move. "What do you want?" She blinked. "Can't a sister drop by just to say hello?" "No. She can't." Lauren shifted her weight. "Okay. Fine. I'll be honest. Dad's sick. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. He's not working. The bills are piling up." A pause. Her eyes glistened. "We need help." I almost laughed. Almost. But it caught in my throat, sharp and bitter. "You need my help?" We thought. "Maybe you could talk to some of your donors. Maybe there's a fund or grant for things like this." Her voice softened into a practiced hush. "You're doing so well now, and we're proud of you." I stepped aside and motioned to the worn sofa in the corner. "Sit down. Let's get something straight." She sat, crossing her legs, waiting for my warmth to return. "It didn't. You threw me out when I couldn't breathe through a single college class without shaking. You laughed when I begged you not to let them do it. You watched me walk out with a duffel bag. And now, you show up with a sad story and expect me to swoop in like it never happened?" Lauren opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "You replaced me with a stranger. And now that things have turned to ash on your side, suddenly I'm family again?" She looked down, like that would make her more human. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "We made mistakes. You made choices." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply stood and pointed at the door. "You can tell Mom and Dad I hope he finds peace in whatever time he has left. But I'm not your bank, and I'm not your redemption arc." She hesitated at the doorway. "You really won't help?" "I already am helping. Every girl in this building has been where I was. I help them. Not the people who left me to rot." As the door shut behind her, I sank into the old chair in my office. My hands trembled, not with sadness, but relief. For years, I'd wondered what I'd do if they ever came crawling back. Now I knew. I wouldn't trade their guilt for my peace, not now. Not ever. I should have known they wouldn't just walk away. 2 weeks after Lauren left, I got an email from a grant agency I'd never applied to. The subject line read, "Follow up on your recent application for the State Family Impact Grant." My stomach turned. I clicked the email and stared at the words, my shelter's name, Sasha's Haven, listed as the applicant. The language made it seem like a family-run initiative. Founded and operated by the Carter family. Carter. As in my family. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Then I opened the attached documents, forged signatures. A fabricated mission statement. A budget sheet listing my name, but not my involvement. And at the very bottom, I saw it, $15,000 approved, pending final review. My hands curled into fists. They hadn't just asked me for help. They'd helped themselves. I printed the documents, every page of them, and laid them out on my desk. It felt surreal, like reading a script from a show about con artists. But this wasn't TV. This was my life. My name. My work, and they were trying to steal it. Fueled by a fury I hadn't felt since the night I was thrown out, I spent the next 3 days gathering evidence. I cross-referenced emails, donor logs, and old family documents. I pulled bank statements showing the shelter's funding sources and receipts for every dollar we had ever used. I knew I had to be careful. If I accused them publicly without proof, they could twist it, paint me as bitter, vengeful, unstable. The troubled one lashing out. but I had receipts. Literally, I reached out to the grant agency directly and spoke with a woman named Dana. Her voice was clipped and professional, until I explained what had happened. "You're saying your parents submitted this without your knowledge or consent?" "Yes," I said. "And they don't work for my organization." "They never have." A long pause. "Then, we'll be launching a fraud investigation immediately. Thank you for coming forward." By the end of the week, the grant was frozen, but that wasn't enough for me. People like my parents, they thrive in shadows. They rewrite history and count on silence to protect them. But I wasn't that scared, quiet girl anymore, so I did what I knew how to do best. I told the truth. I wrote a blog post. Titled it "They Left Me Homeless. Now They Want My Name." I poured everything into it: my eviction, the nights on the street, Sasha, the shelter, and now this. I attached redacted copies of the forged documents. I didn't ask for sympathy, I asked for awareness. The post went viral overnight, and just like that, the story they thought they'd buried rose up and burned. This time, I wasn't the one who disappeared, they were. The post exploded faster than I expected. Within 24 hours, it had over 40,000 shares. Comments poured in, some angry, some in disbelief, most in solidarity. Survivors. Advocates. Even strangers who said, "I thought I was alone." By the end of the week, a local news station picked it up. They ran a segment titled "From Abandoned to Advocate: How One Woman Exposed Her Family's Fraud." They didn't blur out my parents' names. I hadn't asked them to. The fallout was swift. The grant agency launched a formal investigation. My parents were forced to return the funds, and legal action followed. Fraud against a nonprofit isn't just unethical, it's criminal. Their assets were frozen, and Dad's medical bills? No more GoFundMe. No sympathy. Just silence. Lauren tried to keep her distance from the scandal. But it didn't work. Her employer caught wind of the story and placed her on administrative leave. A week later, she was gone from the company website. For the first time, the people who had once held all the power couldn't spin the story in their favor. There was nothing to rewrite. I'd spoken the truth, and backed it with proof, and me? I didn't flinch, not when I saw my mom's passive-aggressive Facebook posts aimed at ungrateful daughters. Not when a distant cousin emailed me to say I'd shamed the family name. Not even when I got a handwritten letter from my dad, filled with guilt, self-pity, and a single line that said, "You really think this makes you better than us?" No. I didn't think I was better. I thought I was finally free. People assumed I did it for revenge. But that was never the point. This wasn't about getting even. It was about making sure they couldn't hurt anyone else, because I knew they would. If not me, then someone else. Another Sasha. Another girl without backup, without money, without a voice. I didn't burn the house down. I exposed it for the hollow, rotting frame it was, and let it collapse under its own weight. And something strange happened in the aftermath. The shelter grew, volunteers doubled. Donations surged. A nearby nonprofit offered to expand our services. We partnered with a mental health clinic. We started a program for job training and transitional housing. Girls walked through our doors crying, and left weeks later with keys in their hands. Sasha's haven wasn't just surviving anymore. It was thriving. Some nights I sat alone in the office, watching the lights flicker through the hallway as the girls slept. I thought about Sasha, about what she'd say if she could see it. Maybe she'd laugh. Maybe she'd roll her eyes and say, "Took you long enough." But I know one thing for sure, she'd be proud. Because this story? It didn't end in betrayal, it rose from it. The hallway at Sasha's haven smells like lavender and warm bread. That's intentional. We bake every Wednesday morning, banana bread, mostly. It fills the place with comfort, something too many of these girls haven't felt in years. Sometimes, the smell alone makes them cry. I understand that. I used to cry when I smelled fresh laundry. Still do, some days. We have 20 beds now. A full-time nurse. 2 therapists. Volunteers from all walks of life. Some are survivors like me. Some just want to help. The intake list is long, but we never turn anyone away without a plan. That's the rule. No more closed doors. A few days ago, a girl named Talia arrived, 17. Quiet. Guarded. She clutched a duffel bag like it held her entire world. Her hands were scratched, her eyes hollow. I didn't ask what happened. I just showed her to her room and told her what I tell everyone on their first night: you're safe now. We don't need your whole story. Just your permission to walk beside you as you write the next chapter. That night, I sat on the floor of my office, the same way I used to sit behind dumpsters. Knees to my chest, heartbeat loud in my ears. But now, I wasn't hiding, I was remembering. Sasha's photo hangs on the wall across from my desk. It's the only one we have, grainy, printed off a shelter sign-in sheet from 2 towns over. But it's her. That fierce, defiant look in her eyes. Like she knew the world owed her more than pain. Sometimes the girls ask who she is. I always tell them the truth: she was my family. Not by blood, but by fire. And then I tell them what we survived together. How we made promises in the cold and turned them into rooms with warm beds and second chances. They don't always respond right away. Some stare at the floor. Others tear up. A few roll their eyes. Too hardened to believe in anything yet, but over time, they come back to that story, because Sasha's name isn't just a name, it's a declaration. That you can be seen. That you can be loved without conditions. That your past doesn't disqualify you from a future. And I've learned something along the way: you don't need to forgive people who never showed remorse. You don't need to reconnect with those who broke you. But you do need something to reach for, something that burns brighter than anger, louder than silence: hope. That's what we offer here, not perfection. Not fairy tales. Just the kind of hope that comes with being believed. I used to think I was broken beyond repair. But now, every time a girl looks me in the eyes and says, "Thank you," I realize, I didn't just survive, I became a lighthouse. And even on the darkest nights, I keep the fire burning. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Hit like to help others find it. Subscribe for more powerful true life stories. And if you've ever felt abandoned, unseen, or like you had to build your life from nothing, drop a comment below.